So, today we are going to talk about the essentials of a plotline. So, whether you are wanting to understand a plotline so that you can write your own narrative, or so that you can better understand and identify a story's plotline, this is going to come in handy for you. So, the first aspect of a plotline is your introduction, or you can also call it the exposition because it's exposing the story. It's the beginning, it's introducing everything. And there are three critical things that you need to know or you need to identify for that introduction. The first being the main characters. So you need to introduce the main characters, and these are people who are integral to the story and its development. Of course, there are going to be a plethora of other characters, and they may help guide the story along and help it move forward. But the main characters are the ones who are crucial to its development or to the message that the story is trying to send. The second thing that needs to be identified in the introduction of a story is the setting. So the setting is the when and the where that things are taking place. So the where obviously is where it's taking place, be that large scale or small scale. Especially with fantasy novels, you want to identify kind of more of the wider world, and maybe if that plays into it. So like if you think of Hunger Games, you need to know large scale where it's taking place and not just the immediate surroundings of the characters. And then the when, that can be everything from like what period in history it's taking place. It's going to be a vastly different story if it's taking place in the modern era versus medieval or Renaissance or ancient Egypt, ancient times. So you need to identify that aspect of when, but also you can add a lot more detail and interest to the story if you kind of give hints to what season of the year. And then, of course, the very immediate things like time of day, all of that. So we've got the main characters, the setting, and then the most important part of the introduction is introducing the main conflict, the original conflict. Depending on your story, there's going to be a lot of different things that come up, but the original conflict is going to be the underlying or the overarching problem that leads the rest of this story. It's going to be what leads up to the climax and ultimately what must be resolved by the end of the story for it to truly have been the original conflict. And in series, I've had some students ask me, well, what about in series where it ends on a cliffhanger and, the problem isn't resolved until the third or seventh book even? And that, again, the series has its overarching conflict that's introduced in the first book and then ultimately resolved by the final book. But each story within that series, it's going to have a conflict that is resolved by the end of that book. Even if there's still a bigger problem, the smaller original conflict will be resolved. So if you think of like Harry Potter, for example, obviously the conflict of Voldemort and all of that isn't resolved until the seventh book. But in the first book, I would argue that the original conflict is that Harry does not feel like he has a true home or true love from those around him. And very clearly by the end of the book, he very much feels like he has a true home, being Hogwarts, and he does have true love from those around him, namely Ron and Hermione, and even Hagrid and Dumbledore. They are part of that chosen family for him. And so you can see that original conflict of that book is resolved by the end, even if it's part of a series where the major conflict isn't resolved until, the last book of the series. So those are the 3 things that you need in your introduction. You need your main characters, your setting, and your main conflict. Also, sometimes when I'm teaching this or testing students on this, I do include the title and the author as part of the introduction. But those are just kind of things that you should know. If you're picking up a book and reading it, you can see the title and the author. And then if you are using this video about the essentials of plotline to write your own narrative, then just know you're the author and the title. You do not need to know the title right from the get-go. Sometimes authors will have a working title, and it's just kind of there as a placeholder. It's what they're referring to their work as for the time being. But sometimes people don't come up with their, winning title until they're basically at the end. Once everything's written, everything's edited, finalized, and then they come up with the title. So that's your introduction. After the introduction comes the rising action. And the rising action is the bulk of the story. If you were to take a book and put your fingers around the amount or the pages in the book that are covering the rising action, it would be a majority of the pages. Because the rising action, that's the journey. That's where all the interesting stuff happens. All of the issues come up because of that original conflict that's guiding all of that. And it's all just this build up of experiences and things that are happening to lead our main character to that moment of change, which is our climax. So the climax is, if you're thinking of the plotline like a mountain, and you've got your introduction and then the rising action, the climax is the peak. And so that peak, that climax, that is what I like to refer to as the point of no return. And the reason it's the point of no return is because either your character or the world, or both, so your character and or the world, are irreversibly changed. Something either has happened, something has been learned that makes it so that your character or the world can't go back to the way it was before. So whether that's your character learning something, or someone dying, or a big catastrophic event, or a decision being made that changes everything, that's your climax. That's the point of no return. Things cannot go back to the way they were before because they are irreversibly changed. I feel like I'm talking a lot with my hands. So that's your climax. That's the peak of the story. The way to identify the climax is to ask yourself, are things irreversibly changed? Can they go back to the way they were before? If not, then that's probably your climax. Then after the climax is the falling action. So your falling action, that's the immediate aftermath of that event of the climax. It's kind of the wind down. Sometimes it's the collateral damage. Collateral meaning like the stuff on the outskirts that has kind of been affected by ripple effect. And so that's your falling action. It's where things are kind of being wrapped up. And then your resolution, I call it the resolution. You can also refer to it as a conclusion, but I like referring to it as the resolution because it's a good reminder that this is the end of the story, and so that original conflict from your intro must be resolved by this point. The climax is probably where it was, that thing was changed, that either taught your main character something, changed the world in some way that helps resolve that original conflict. But the resolution is where things are finalized. That original conflict is resolved, hence calling it the resolution. So that pretty much sums up the essentials of a plotline, the things that you need to know if you are either having to identify these different parts of a narrative, or if you are starting the endeavor of writing your own narrative. Hopefully this little guide comes in handy to you. So let me know what other kind of English related videos, English language arts videos you either would like to see or that you need help with, because I'm more than happy to help, and this is what I love to do. So make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you around.